I don't know that the United States has ever been in a position where it can just be isolated, or
right.
that an isolationist policy is the correct thing for us or for anyone globally, for anyone interested in rule of law, to just think that we can sit idly by.
Yeah. I think that's a great statement.
And so I think that's where we play those roles, and sometimes it can be frustrating, and sometimes when it shows up, it seems as if sometimes you're going to get those things that pop up that you may not want to see or may not feel comfortable, but in reality is that these are the things that are done and that are done every day.
And have to be handled properly.
And have to be handled properly, professionally, with soldiers of utmost moral character.
Yeah, guys like you.
And
guys like you and your team.
And the team,
yeah. Because you're only as good as your weakest link.
Yes.
And that's one thing I've learned by working with former Special Forces guys in the Army, and I have some friends that are still active duty. Their character, it runs deep. What's the lesson?
The lesson is that we misunderstood the strategic environment.
Right.
We misread the intelligence, and we believe that we could prevent war by not properly outfitting, equipping, and training our ally.
So people listening to you right now and that are going to say, you know what I got out of this from Mr. Maxwell, retired, always a Green Beret, retired colonel, 30 years. What do I need to do? Because I want to make sure that I'm constantly everyday GSDing. What lesson am I learning from Mr. Maxwell? What is the takeaway that I'm getting from him right now?
We need to understand the operational environment, and we need to do what is necessary to help our friends, partners, and allies to defend themselves from attack. And as George Washington said, the only way to prevent war is to prepare for it. And our belief that by that we don't want war and that we should seek peace through weakness, that is going to come back to haunt us, and it did in Korea.
I did a couple more things for a couple
years.
And
you created.
This is the wooden reproduction. This is actually the prototype that was built by the NSA machine shop, because back in those days, NSA built little black boxes where messages, what we called plain text, would go in, and cipher or code would come out. So I was working with Special Forces, and long story short, they use, it's hard to do without visual aids, and if people don't know what it's talking about, but this is essentially a way to do encryption with what's called a one-time pad. And I came up with this originally just for my purposes, just to help me out, because this is really a representation of what's called a trigraph, three-letter groups that are very unique that they use to do their communications. And they would memorize them, and I didn't. So this was just a little cheat for me, but they liked it so much we ended up making like 15,000 of them and distributing it to all the teams in all the Special Forces groups. And they used it for about 10 years. So that's why I'm here, essentially, is because of what they called the whiz wheel.
When I was getting out, I was really, I didn't go through some existential crisis. I'm just not that kind of guy. But I went through a purpose and passion kind of relook. Like, hey, who am I? What do I do? What does God want me to do? You're like, what am I good at? And oftentimes, there's that question that people always ask: Are you good at what you love, or do you love what you're good at? You know what I mean?
Exactly. That's a great statement.
As much as I love basketball, this 5'7" white boy ain't gonna be a basketball player.
Did you hear that statement, Justin? Yeah, say that one again. I like that.
Do you love what you do, or do you do what you love?
Yeah.
And I think we gravitate towards those things. And I think what I've, one of the gifts that I have is just kind of resiliency, stubbornness, grit, that kind of thing.
Right.
Again, I'm just, look at me. I'm just an average dude in every other way. So, but when I was looking at retiring, I realized what I really love is the hunt. And a friend of mine, Mike, he said to me one time, the hunt is better than the kill.
Yeah, it's
And
true, right?
We were talking about combat,
Yeah.
but I think hunters out there recognize that also. Like
Right.
you don't go hunting because of the kill. I mean, you
Right.
spend a lot of hours,
Yeah.
and that kill is a very, very short moment.
Right.
And it's the same in combat. You're spending a lot of time hunting, and when I think about combat, and I think about those moments that really are burned into my mind, it really is watching the ISR, prepping, ready to go out, like, watching this guy go home to eat his dinner and knowing, I hope you're nice to your family tonight.
Yeah.
Because this is the last fucking meal you're going to eat.
And knew, if it wasn't for my daughter, I probably wouldn't be here.
Right.
And so I was like, I don't care. I'm going to fix myself. And when I started learning about all this stuff, I was like, oh my God. Not only is it blatantly obvious what it is, it's overlooked. And we're not even looking
Right.
at the most important thing that controls how we react and adapt to our environment, which is our brain and our nervous system. And I said, okay, man, this is like operating a weapon. This thing in our brain housing group literally, takes feedback from the environment and says yes or no, or fight or flight. We don't do the flight part,
Right.
or feed and breed. And we did the fight part and the breed part pretty well, but we didn't do the maintenance part or, repair the damage we were doing all day.
Right.
So that whole work-life balance
Extensive
thing-
damage. Extensive damage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then adding toxins on top of the brain injury and the blast overpressure, and then sleep deprivation, and then all things fun, alcohol, tobacco, and fornication. That was how we managed stress.
Right.
And so when you look at alcohol, group 1 human carcinogen, tobacco products carcinogen.
Yeah.
I didn't get any STDs, thank God, but for some people,
Yeah.
they can be carcinogenic, right?
Yeah.
Oral rectal cancers are mostly caused by STDs.
Right.
So I was like, holy crap. Putting all these things on paper, stacking them up.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's a miracle we even live this long.
Right.
I was like,
Because how
testament.
old are you right now?
I'm 46.
You're 46.
Yeah.
And your body's been abused.
Yeah. Used
Yeah.
and abused.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I realized early on is going into a leadership role, because you're right, you don't end up as a 3-star when you start as a second lieutenant, those many years before.
Right.
You sit there and you go, well, as a leader, every leader is a role model, and that takes on two tacks. There's a white side and a black side. The white side is, that's a good example. The black side is, I don't want to be that guy.
Right.
And what your buddy, what your ASM or whatever
Yeah.
you said he was,
Yeah.
what he saved you from was, hey, see that guy's a great example of a bad example. Don't be it. And you go, perfect. Because people look to that. And then after that, after second lieutenant, and you start moving up, you start to have to forge probably an ideal of consistency of behavior. That becomes your
Right.
character. That becomes who you are.
It's embedded in you.
It is. And then at a certain point, you realize, wow, that those are your values. Then the opposite happens. People start looking at you and going, oh, I want to work with him. I
Right.
want to be around that guy. I know what I'm going to get.
Right.
I'm going to go see what, kind of strange, but we're going to go do shit, aren't we? We go,
Right.
yeah, we are going to go do shit.
Right.
So the part that's not in my bio or you didn't read was I felt I had a really, I'd say, fortunate career that people would see things like that guy did for you. They would see things in you and they would go, oh, you know what? I can trust you to get this done. I go, yeah, you can. If I
Right.
told you I'm going to do it, I have it within my intellect and capability
Yeah.
and physicality.
Yep.
I can go get it done.
I'm capable and competent. I can do it.
I can do it. So you want me to get it done? Yeah, okay. And that starts again forging, besides the intellectual part of it, it forges, the results-oriented life that you want to live.
Right.
Which is GSD. You
Right.
get shit done. And you go, well, here we go.
It's awesome to have the opportunity to go and fight for your country, to be a trusted guardian for that freedom, right?
Right.
And then face the enemy, fight like hell, and come home alive to be a citizen in a place that you swore was worth dying for, but you didn't have to die.
Right.
And other people did, so there's some guilt associated with that, but there's honor in it. And so I don't have to regret any of it. I knew that these things could happen because by the time I raised my right hand, how many tens of thousands of soldiers had died from making the same decision?
Right.
But I did it anyway. And
knowing what you might be able to get, what might happen to you.
absolutely. So I had to accept that as a part of it. And what kind of a hypocrite would it make me to betray the honor that it took to raise my right hand in those conditions in the first place by becoming a victim somehow, as though if it happens to me, it changes the game?
Right.
No, I couldn't let that happen. But on an individual basis, there was a lot of work I had to do to learn how to live again.
Right.
And it would start with me learning to do the one thing no one ever taught me to do, and that was surrender. Because I had not surrendered to faith or love or compassion or a better definition of service.
Right.
But laying in a hospital bed when you go from Green Beret to people wiping your butt 15 times a day,
Right.
It'll humble you, and you start
Yeah.
to learn what service really is, serving something greater than yourself. And believe it or not, you can be a Green Beret or a SEAL or any of these things and simply be serving yourself, because it's all about your identity, your reputation, and we drive into it like that with an ego sometimes.
So light infantry, essentially we did all of our operations were based off of our 2 feet. So anything we did, we didn't have vehicles, we didn't have trucks, we didn't have helicopters, tanks, whatnot. So
Your body is your machine.
Your body is your machine. So so you just trained with heavy crap on your back.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, well, we got to go do this operation.
Nothing wrong with your knees.
Yeah,
You're fine.
30K
Here's some,
away.
Here's some Motrin.
Yeah. So yeah, showed up, second ID, our 2nd Brigade, 2nd ID, and then a couple months in, we reflagged as 4th Brigade, 4th Infantry Division, and we went right into training cycle for Afghanistan deployment. So my first deployment was 2009. I left in May of 2009 to Kunar Province, Afghanistan, which for those of you who don't know, it's up in RC East, or was RC East, in the Hindu Kush Mountains, so essentially along the Pakistan border. We did
A hot zone.
Oh, it was a great time. Yeah, it was a great time. So there's actually a couple videos or documentaries like Korangal Valley and whatnot, and Hornet's Nest and all that stuff. So that whole region is where I really kind of had my come to Jesus moments.
Yeah.
So those. We did a
Where
lot
Zach says you lived, you're like, yeah, I fucking survived.
survived. I mean, I don't know who I was talking to the other day, but they're saying, it was one of the Green Berets here. He's like, yeah, we deployed for 4 months and we were in 78 days of sustained combat. Well, I think we were there for like 380 something days, and we had 372 days or something like that of sustained combat operations.
Storytelling is healing, and it doesn't have to just happen in a therapist's office, because when you tell a story, you naturally give us a beginning and a middle and an end. You're trying to wrap it up. You're trying to make sense of it. And so just talking is really good for you, like to build that narrative. And in fact, to the point where there was one person, Kevin Fleich, who's a good friend of mine, who's on the board, the Green Beret Foundation, and for a while he wanted to write a book. And so for years, we were working on his story and parts of his story and going over and over again. He was shot, and it was a career-ending injury, and it was a pivotal moment in his life, mentally, physically, for multiple reasons. When we finally got the project done, he had some really big heart-to-hearts with his wife, and he's like, you know what, Alice, I'm ready to stop defining myself by that event. Now I'm okay, and I'm looking forward.
Yeah.
And it was so, like, writing the book was the most therapeutic thing he could have done. But once he was done, he didn't want it to be a book anymore.
Yeah.
It's good. It's
and
good.
if you really think about that, it's touching, because your skill, your education, your ability to share someone's story through the pen allows them to heal.
And there's a lot of, and I want to say love in a Christian sense, like, I don't know, agape or whatever you want to call it, but like, I'm not talking about romantic love, but there's this very human, primal connection that occurs. And so there's something in it for me too, because when I write a story, I have to internalize that. And it's not that it happened to me, but it becomes very close and very personal to me. And so with every story, it's like I become more invested in this community. I was joking with some people at lunch. I was like, I'm like a surrogate, because all these guys are like, well, you're going to write my book. You're going to write my book. And I was like, I'm like a surrogate mom. Y'all want to have a baby. But it's kind of like that. It's, they look at me and they see the book, and that's great because I told them, like one guy was saying, well, maybe we should write a book. And I said, no, you showed me something you wrote. You want to be a writer. You don't need me to write your book. Maybe we just need to partner and do a little coaching as friends, like just have some conversations to give you the confidence to realize that you're already doing it.